Siddhartha Gautama was a prince of what is known today as present-day Nepal. The capital city of Nepal being Kathmandu. And Siddhartha Gautama was raised in a place where all he knew was goodness, at least that's what the story says. And he had experienced everything from all the pleasures of life that anyone can think about. And as soon as he left the palace, he had a strange discovery. And the strange discovery was that there was there was, in one word, suffering. And he was shocked as to see this suffering, this thing called suffering. And he, though being great in economic wealth and prosperity, which every single human, which probably you and I would want to have, you and I would probably want to have those kinds of luxuries as he had. And perhaps some of us would be such lovers of pleasure that perhaps we would even philosophize, or we would even think about life because we might indulge in so much pleasures that could perhaps break our intellect, or perhaps dumb our intellect and our way of thinking and our thought process and whatever else. But Siddhartha Gautama had all of those things. He had all of the pleasures of life. He experienced everything. And it reminds me of Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic Roman emperor, who had everything as well. Yet he decided to pursue a virtuous life, a life of morality, a life of rightness, a life of what is good, a life of living according to nature, to be in harmony with nature. Siddhartha Gautama, as soon as he found out about this suffering outside of the palace, in which he saw, in which was to his shock, because apparently he hadn't seen any of this stuff, he decided to figure out, to go on a journey to figure out, to go on a long inquiry to figure out about suffering. Why is there suffering? What is the origin of suffering? And everything about the Buddhist tradition is about, in one word, suffering. And he decides to go out, and he meets these Hindu individuals. I forgot the name of what they're called, but perhaps priests, or perhaps Hindu holy men. That's something I can be confident about saying. And he decides to starve himself. But then he realizes, no, the body needs food. And so he receives this delicious rice porridge called kheer from this girl. And he eats, and his health is replenished after starving himself for a while and realizing that he cannot starve himself for so long, that he needs to eat, because the human body can go so far, and the human body calls for us to, in order for us to thrive, we have to consume. And Siddhartha himself consumed most of his life. He had the pleasures of life. He had everything. He could consume anything he wants. He could have sex with whoever he wants. He can marry whoever he wants. And as far as I remember, I as far as I remember, I believe he had children as well. And this young, handsome, tall prince, after his health was replenished, he meditates, and he reaches enlightenment. And he comes to this, and this wisdom is received to him in regard to suffering. And asking the questions, of course, as to why is there suffering, what is the origin of suffering, and how to liberate oneself from suffering. And so he finds the answers to all of these questions, and he decides, and there are 3 individuals who follow him. I don't know if they were those Hindu men, I'm not exactly sure. Pardon me for I lack the historical accuracy of this, but what I do know is that there were 3 men who lived, there were 3 men who came under Siddhartha after Siddhartha became enlightened, and he became known as what is called, in I believe it is the language of Pali, called the Buddha, or the Buddha, meaning the enlightened one, or an enlightened one. And there are 3 individuals who came under him and took monkhood. And these 3 individuals were passed down the knowledge of the Buddha, and these were the Buddha's first disciples, his first followers, 3 individuals. And that event took place in what is known today as Deer Park in India. And when one looks at the Buddhist tradition, one not only sees philosophical inquiry as to the problems of life, but one also experiences the problems of life. In the Western tradition, we like to talk and talk and talk and talk, whereas in the Buddhist tradition, it is more about experience, being more aware of experience, being mindful, being heedful. Satipatthana, vipassana, in Pali. And now the Buddha now Siddhartha has reached Buddhahood. He has reached enlightenment. And these 3 individuals are now his disciples. And so the message of the Buddha spreads everywhere. The religion of Buddhism grows, or perhaps the philosophical tradition of Buddhism grows. It's more of a philosophical tradition if one looks at it from an empirical viewpoint, but then it becomes religious as soon as we start to discuss the transcendent realities of perhaps transcendent realities. Things such as gods and demons and ghosts and the different heavens and the different hells, the different realms of transcendence which one cannot see with the senses, empirically observe. So perhaps that's where Buddhism would fall into world religions, or a religion, due to the metaphysical aspects of the philosophical tradition of Buddhism. But ignoring all of the metaphysical aspects and focusing more on the empirical aspects and the whole entire point of the philosophy to begin with is that the followers of the Buddha form what is known as the Sangha. And the Sangha in Pali means a community. And there are different types of Sanghas. The ones with lay people, the ones with just monks, and they're just different types. And so we get many stories of the Buddha that come afterward in what is called in the book, in a book called the Dhammapada in Pali. It's kind of like the Quran of Islam, for example. The Pali Canon, or the Tipitaka, or Dhammapada. Those are various names for the sayings of the Buddha. And then you also have the suttas as well, which are sayings of the Buddha. But the Dhammapada has sayings of the Buddha as well. And there is something that is worth noting here. That the Buddha emphasizes one thing, and that is heedfulness, that is mindfulness, that is being mindful, being heedful. That is the way to experience the liberation from suffering. That is the way to experience what is called in Pali Nibbana. In our modern day, perhaps people know it as Nirvana. And yes, there is a band based off of that name, which is Sanskrit of the Pali Nibbana. And yes, the language at the time of the Buddha was Pali. And the Buddha has what is called the teachings of his, called in Pali the Dhamma, or perhaps, I believe in Sanskrit, it's called Dharma. And going back to the Buddha's way to be happy and experience peace and to liberate oneself from suffering is to be mindful. And the word mindful perhaps is not a good translation. Personally, for me, I also think that it is a translation that perhaps can be improved. And the word that I can find in English that I find to be a good pick for the translation of the Pali is heedfulness. To be heedfulness. Of course, being mindful and mindfulness are other words, but heedfulness is a word that I would pick from the translation. And it makes sense, because when one becomes crazy, one starts to think about so many things instead of focusing on one thing. Especially in this technological world nowadays in 2025, and especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where I'm from. And it seems that as we are growing technologically, everything is just being fast cars, fast technology. We have 5G networks. We have simply things that are faster transportation, especially in China nowadays. In Japan, we have those are what are called bullet trains, or in Japan Shinkansen trains, and I forgot what the name of it is in China, but it's the same bloody concept as fast trains, and everything just seems to be fast, and perhaps being too fast and too thinking about so many things at the same time could drive one mad. And that was the case of one story about the Buddha as well, where there was this woman who, I want to tell this story about the Buddha as well. This is a very interesting story to talk about. There was this woman from who she found love, she found a man, and this woman and man ended up having a child. And this woman first lost her husband, the man that she fell in love with, and then afterward soon lost her baby. And so she went mad. She went crazy. But then, this was in the time of the Buddha. But then, as soon as she met the Buddha, and after hearing about him and his teaching, she gave up the life of a laywoman and became a nun, a Buddhist nun. And that transformed her life, because it tells you so much about suffering, that existence, that life in and of itself is not an easy life to live, that the reality of existence is that all that is impermanent. Things do not last. Things do not last forever. Things change over time. One time rises, one time an object rises, another time an object falls. Life is impermanent. Existence is impermanent. One moment a living being is born, another moment a living being dies. That is an essential teaching of the Buddha as well, that life, existence is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. And if one brings up metaphysical concepts such as the heavens and gods and things in regard to rebirth, when one dies, one is reborn into the heavens after doing so many good things because of the law of cause and effect. The more good you cultivate, the more good you'll get in the next rebirth and things of that sort, where there is no soul in the Buddhist tradition, but there is what is called continued experience, I believe. If I'm not correct, you can always correct me on that. But as far as I can recall, that experience just continues. That whatever's in our heads, the memories that are, continue on even though after the physical body decays. Even after one expires, what is in the brain, those memories, those thoughts, those processes continue on into another living organism that becomes born. And you can even choose to become born as this or become born as that as well, depending on your intention as to what you want to be born as. It's an incredible thought, but empirically I've never seen that for myself. And there is what is called when you die. I heard that when you die, that there are memories that play in your head before you die, before you expire, and also that when your body expires, your brain is still alive. There's something going on in your brain that is just, it's just very, very interesting to see that kind of stuff. And perhaps that is the time process of that continued experience being replayed and perhaps moving on into another living thing that becomes born. Perhaps. I don't know. I've never seen that for myself empirically. observe that. And impermanence is not only a concept within the Buddhist tradition, but it could also correlate back to the Western tradition with Marcus Aurelius and him being the Stoic Roman emperor, that he talks a lot about death as well, as far as I can reckon. That death is a reality, that one day all of us are going to die, that we can only do so much to prevent our death, to be in good health, to do whatever we can, but death will eventually take a hold of us and grasp us away from this current reality which we are experiencing. As you're hearing my voice and as I'm speaking to you, I one day will expire and be taken a hold by death itself, and you will one day expire and you will be taken a hold of death itself one day, which demonstrates the reality of impermanence in the universe. One moment stars are born, another moment stars die. One moment a life form is born, and another moment a life form dies. In one moment is a birthday, and in another moment is a funeral. Or perhaps I should say that's in regard to different things happening at the same time. But one moment you have a birthday party, and perhaps soon later that birthday party will fade away. The same with the funeral. One day you'll have there's one time of a funeral, and perhaps hours later on, that funeral service is no longer gonna be. Things change. With time, things change. All we have is the current present moment. The past is gone. The future is to come. And where we are living in is the current moment, the present moment. And that is what we must live in. And the Buddha wants us. The Buddha says that you should live in the present moment. You should not worry about the past. You should not worry about the future. You should live in the present moment. Be heedful. Then you'll experience Nibbana. You'll experience the liberation from suffering. You'll experience peace. You'll be happy when you are in the present moment. When you're not worrying about this or fearing about that, but you are living in the present moment. All of your fears and worries being gone. The Buddha also talks about meditation as well, in which it is a big part of the Buddhist tradition in order for one to experience. Do you see what I said? Did you see the word that I said there? To experience what is empirically observed as suffering, why suffering occurs, how suffering occurs, and the origin of suffering, and how to liberate oneself from suffering, how to free oneself from suffering. As far as I can reckon, if I am not mistaken, that there is a saying by the Buddha himself who said that there is nobody that can save us. It is only us that can save ourselves. And if that is really the case of what he said, then he says this, that there is nobody that can save you. To save you from your suffering, to save you from your desires, and save you from this and that. There's nobody that can save you, the Buddha says. Nobody can save you from your own suffering. You must work at it yourself. You want to stop doing drugs? Then go to rehab and get off the drugs from there. You want to lose the weight? Then start eating more healthy. You want to live longer? Well, perhaps that's not suffering. Perhaps people want to die younger. But the point is this, is that you must do what you can in order to eliminate your own suffering. Only you can be happy, and only you can decide to eliminate your own suffering. It is your choice and what you do. Because a lot of us actually create our own sufferings. And it is only us, because we are the ones that create it, we are also the ones that can eliminate it. So you must do what you can to save yourself. It's as simple as that. Get off the drugs, go to rehab. Want to burn the fat? Drink green tea. Burns fat. Do whatever you can. Start eating healthy. Start going to the gym. Combine all of those things, then you become a healthy person than you were yesterday. Or than you were 2 weeks ago as a fat slob that you were. Now, you're a healthy individual. Why? Because you eliminated your own suffering. Only you can do that. And that is correlative to the Stoic virtue as well, in which the Stoic virtue says that it is only you, that the only thing that you are in control of is yourself. What is beyond yourself is not within your control. The weather, your death, your sickness, other people. That is the Stoic virtue, is that you are the only thing that you are in control of is yourself. Everything that is not yourself, you're not in control of that. So because that is the very foundation of living a good life, or living a healthy life, and eliminating suffering, and living happy and peaceful, that's completely up to you. It is not someone else's responsibility to make sure that you're healthy and wealthy, that you're healthy and your suffering is gone, and that your life is peaceful and happy. That is your own responsibility. You must take responsibility of that. This is the Buddhist tradition and the Stoic tradition are very alike. They emphasize that it is only you that is in control of yourself, and that everything that is outside of yourself, that is outside of yourself, is beyond your control. And that the message is very clear from both the Buddhist and the Stoic tradition, is that it is only you that can save yourself from your own sufferings. It is only you that can choose to live a life of peace and happiness. It is only you that must put the work into achieving a life that is good, a life that is peaceful, a life that is free from suffering. Do not depend on anyone else for help. It is only you that can do the job. You must put the work into achieving happiness, peace, as well as liberating yourself from suffering.